Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Daniel. I'm a recovery coach down here in Amarillo, Texas. Um, I suffer from substance use disorder. Mainly, my DOCs were methamphetamines and heroin. Had a very heavy addiction to both. And basically, what I like to do is I get on here and I like to talk to people and try to bring recovery to the bedroom, put it in the car radio, wherever you are. I feel like recovery should be not just in the rooms and places you have to go, but in places that you're already at. Today, I want to really talk about triggers, relationships, and external stressors that relationships bring. Right, and I would like to start this off with the question of like, have you ever been in a relationship or had to choose between your recovery and your relationship? The reason I bring this up is in my 25 years of addiction, I didn't really believe in relationships. I was in a relationship when I went into addiction, and I thought it was a relationship that I was very serious about. And then when that didn't work, I kind of drifted in and out of different relationships. And what I found was is that I was always second, and they were always second. Just to be perfectly honest, you know what I'm saying. My addiction was always the primary source or the primary focus of my life. And I didn't like it when I was put second behind someone's addiction, and they definitely didn't like it when I put them second. But that was the focus. The focus was the heroin. The focus was the methamphetamines, and a lot of times, um, whatever came with that, whether it was seeking drugs, seeking the money to get drugs, to the lifestyle that comes with it, you really find your relationships on the back end of your priority list when it comes to how serious these relationships are. And so not in just saying that, but what I find being on the flip side of this, and I can relate to this as well, is for years I always put a condition on my recovery. I said, well, I'm gonna pull this person out with me, or I'm gonna try to save this one. We're gonna go do this together. We're gonna, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is something we can do together, so I don't have to do it alone. And what I realized is that was my excuse to keep doing it. That was my cop out, right? I don't want to leave him. I don't want to leave a man behind. I don't want to do this on my own, and that's really just fear talking, fear and ignorance that step into play during those things. Um, recovery has to be for you. Ultimately, it has to be for you, by you. You know what I'm saying? If I'm in a relationship with a toxic person that triggers me, right? Whether I love that person or not, I have to put that person aside and put me first. And I've realized this even now that now I'm a coach and I'm married. Um, I still to this day, I have to put me first. I have to put me first, because if I'm not in the right state of mind, or if I'm not progressing in my own recovery, then I'm hurting my wife's recovery. I'm hurting our recovery. I'm hindering the relationship, right? So it's always got to be self progression. I always have to be making progress, moving forward, and really ultimately making myself happy and making me my purpose in life, right? Because if I'm not succeeding, then I feel like I'm leeching, or I'm dependent, or I can't, or just you get swallowed up in this fear that you don't know how to get out of, and you're relying on other people. And really, the purpose of recovery is to become self-empowered and self-reliant, so that one day you can make good, healthy decisions and move forward in healthy, productive manner, versus falling back into these same cycles of addiction that we just naturally fall into, right? And our family members tend to get really upset with us because they try to throw logic at it, right? And where logic is not so much the answer to our problem, right? Even the Bible tells us, never trust a desperate man, because a desperate man will do anything to get what he needs. You know what I mean? And addiction works in that manner. You know what I'm saying? Our substances, our alcohol, our addictions, those are our relief. That's where where the world sees a problem. That was the solution to our problem, right? So that creates a very big gap of understanding between what we call non-player characters and people who are suffering in the world of addiction today. There's just a lack of understanding because you're trying to throw logic at emotion, and emotion's always going to overwhelm logic, almost always. You know what I'm saying? Especially people who don't know how to understand their feelings, navigate their emotional states, people who don't know how to control their thoughts. You know what I mean? And James Allen said it perfect in his book, As a Man Thinketh. He says, as a man thinks, so he is. But as a man continues to think, so he remains. And for me, that speaks directly to purpose and identity, right? As I perceive myself, as I perceive the world around me, I self-manifest these things. And I can go back to many times in my addiction where I have self-manifested a bad result. Like I said, I was in a relationship for a long time. And I remember towards the beginning of that relationship, I knew it wasn't going to work. But in my mind, I wanted to hold on to it for as long as I could. And I manifested that. And in doing so, I put myself through a lot of anguish. I put myself through a lot of pain. I put my kids through a lot of pain. I put my family through a lot of pain. I put a lot of non-player characters through a lot of grief. There was a lot of destruction that came behind me wanting to be in a very toxic relationship instead of separating myself from that. And looking back on it now, I wish it would have never happened, right? I wish I would have walked away from it when I did, and maybe we could still be friends. Today that's impossible, But when we make these choices to stay in toxic environments, right, it's just like the disease of addiction, the toxicity progresses, right? Things get more serious, things get more eventful, and often in negative ways. I can think back to when I first started doing meth and cocaine and ecstasy and some of those other drugs, and it was a lot of fun. We were going to clubs, we were going to party, big hangouts, lots of people, lots of social interaction, right? It was all fun and games. And as the years went by, it became no longer fun and games. It became very serious. It became very dark. And then at the end of the day, I couldn't even take care of myself. For the last few years of my addiction, I got very sick. And then I was completely reliant on addicted people to help me. And so it put me in a very bad place, physically, mentally, and spiritually, that I didn't know how to climb out of. I had no idea what to do. I was in an environment that had overwhelmed me. I couldn't protect myself from, people, places, and things, and I was basically at the will of other people. And when I was at the will of other people, what I found is I was always unsatisfied with the result. And a lot of people say people fail us, and I don't necessarily say like that's the cause. It's like people fail us. A lot of times I think people will say, okay, I will help you, not knowing to what extent that really is, right? And so healthy people who are these non-player characters like my dad, he would step in and say, man, I'll help you. And when I would go stay with him for a week, it lasts maybe a week or two, and then boom, it's done. Like, you got to go, right? It's because it's something unhealthy for his household, for me to be in, and it goes against his logic. And that's what I'm saying. Like, logic really doesn't have a place to play. And if you really want to get like super logical about it, like, it's a social disease. It's a disease that stems directly from how we treat each other. You know what I mean? And that's non-player characters and people in addiction alike. That's where it comes from. It turns into a physical disorder or disease as it progresses, but that's right where it starts. It is from the way we treat each other, and that's based off of what our logic is, and our belief systems are built on our thoughts, our experiences, the ways we were brought up, and I think what you're finding right now is that in the United States, we've become this cultural smelting pot where we have people from everywhere, from all different cultures, different belief systems, different ways of life, and we're all trying to cope with that and force our way on each other, and it's just not working, right? Culture plays a huge, massive part in what's going wrong with addiction, and the way we go about it. I'm not one personally who can sit here and say I can force somebody to recover, and I honestly don't even feel like controlled recovery is healthy. You know, then that's simply because it takes the willingness away from someone. It takes their ability to make their own healthy decisions, and we say, okay, we're going to make decisions for you, and where that may work for a certain amount of time, when that administration or that authority backs off and steps away, then we're right back to square one. So the only real answer to uh, the addiction problem is to help people become self-empowered and self-reliant in their own recovery, right? And that's exploring those thoughts, it's exploring those feelings, it's exploring those emotions, and it's seeing how they affect us, right? We tend to think that we can take this systematic approach and treat everybody exactly the same and expect these great results, and it just doesn't work that way, right? I've never been one to believe in a certain system is the only way that works. There's tons of different avenues of recovery out there in the world, and you really have to go based on an individual's needs, right? If with the big cultural difference here, like all faith-based programs ain't going to work for everybody, right? So there has to be another way, and then for people who are dealing with physical disorders, there has to be another way. I mean, there's all kinds of these different problems, right? And backgrounds and these differences that we have. And what I see in the recovery world is a lot of we can't come to terms on those differences. And what you see is 1 out of 10 people actually finding long lasting recovery. You know, and saying that, let's go to some triggers, man. You know what I'm saying? What triggers me? Now, in my recovery, I've always found it best to not just speak it, but to actually paint a picture in my head of what my triggers look like, right? So, one of my big triggers, and it's even to this day, it always seems to unravel me, right, is the holiday season. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, things that I remember spending time with my kids with that I don't get to do anymore. Those are always deep, dark, depressing days to me, and those are the days where I don't necessarily get the compulsion to use, but I'm not very social. I'm probably not in the best of moods. I isolate real bad. I haven't really enjoyed one of those holidays, um, since coming out of addiction. So and what that looked like in addiction, that looked like me in a hotel room, consuming massive amounts of drugs in a deep, dark, depressive state. Oftentimes in a lot of self hate, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, um, suicidal tendencies, and then, at some point during the day, I used to make a lot of bad decisions on those days, and I would stay away from family, I would stay away from friends, and those were marks, I guess, what I'm saying, on my days of the year. But those are still today something that really stresses me out. It's one of those external stressors that I'm still working on. Another trigger for me is seeing people I care, that I got into recovery with, go back out, and that's hard. for me. I've had some friends of mine that were really close to me that when we got into recovery, they inspired me. They were that beacon of hope for me to try this thing out, and pushed me. And to see some of those people go back out really broke my heart. And then not just to see them go back out, but to see how these non-player characters that we talk about, how they treated them. They were instantly shamed. They were instantly thrown right back to the wolves. And I mean, I'm a firm believer, dude. If you can't, um, if one of your boundaries is that you can't have that around, I fully understand that. But to just completely chunk somebody back in the lion's den for an addict is it just destroys everything. You know what I'm saying? And I think one of the ways that we can stop doing that is to quit taking the term relapse and thinking everything that comes with it. To expect perfection is a flaw in logic itself, right? Like, people will always make mistakes, and to expect somebody to get this one and done is a super flawed way of thinking. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't. You know what I'm saying? Now, have I met some people who have got really a lot of years and have said they've done it one and done? Yes, I have. But just to be painfully honest, those people weren't out there for a very long time. You know what I'm saying? It was a quick little, 6 month or a year run through, and they ended up, getting into some sort of legal trouble, and that kind of curbed that enthusiasm. But for your long-term addicts, it is you're talking about somebody who is vulnerable at every level, at every single level. I would tell people when they come into recovery, get ready to do the most courageous thing that you're ever going to do in your life, because you're going to put everything out there on the table, right? For not just me, but for other people to look at. And it's going to put you in an extremely vulnerable, weak state, to where you're going to be susceptible to attack from everyone and from every direction, right? And you don't, and that's what a lot prevents people from coming in here, is that thought process that I'm going to come in here, I'm going to lay it out there, and you know what I'm saying, I'm going to get judged by the court, and so that's on us. You know what I mean? Like, that's on us in society, on how we treat each other. You know, I always try to make it a healing and understanding moment. I always try to be present in the moment. So when people are airing out their dirty laundry to me, I don't necessarily, hey, I have just this immediate response to your problem, because if I'm doing that, then I'm not present in the conversation. If I'm just sitting there trying to throw solutions at people instead of trying to really understand the root cause of what's fueling this person's addiction and learning to understand that person, then I'm not doing them no justice. And a lot of times that means hanging my belief system up on the shelf. And because the way I did it, for one, I don't want everybody to have to go through, because my road to recovery was a really rough, hard road, right? And for two, what if my way doesn't work for them? What if my solution isn't their solution? What if my goals, my ambition, my drive isn't the same as theirs? Then it creates a huge, again, gap of understanding, and we don't know how to fix each other. So a lot of times I have to hang my belief system up on the shelf, stay calm, cool, and collected, and really listen to people about their problems, and try to understand where they're coming from. As far as external stressors go, like especially with people, man, I find a lot of times people will go back out because of the way somebody treated them. Whether they treated them badly, whether they treated them shamefully, whether this legal system that we have in place makes it impossible for them to move forward. And so my answer to that is, again, as a man thinks, so he is. I cannot control, I cannot control the way people look at me. I cannot control what happens outside of me, right? I can't make other people believe me. I can't make other people see my way. I can't make other people trust me, right? All I can do is control how I react to those situations, right? Um, it's, for instance, like if somebody were to get up in my face and want to talk a whole bunch of mess or talk down on me or say something really bad about me in front of a crowd of people, you know what I mean? I can't control that. All I can control is how do I react to that, right? And what that looks like is me just completely blowing that person off. You know what I mean? I don't even have to say a word to it. And whereas people will say you're a coward, right? For me, that's the most. I'm stepping out there. I'm learning to love myself. I don't have to engage with people who have a problem with me. I just don't, right? If you're not messing with my self-preservation or my family's preservation, I don't have to engage with you. And at the end of the day, I'm making that right move. Because if I do engage with you, by the end of that night, I'm probably in a situation 10 times worse than when I walked in there. And it's not that person I'm mad at anymore. It's myself. I'm full of shame. I'm full of guilt. I'm full of, damn it, everybody. I proved everybody right. And today I just can't do that to myself no more. You know what I'm saying? Now, I walk away from a situation. What does that mean? That means I let my actions speak louder than my words. If somebody's got something bad to say about me, then I should look at that, right? I should look at that as a constructive criticism, right? And if it affects me in some way, then I need to look at that, right? If it pisses me off, I need to, okay, I got to look at my anger a little bit. Why is this upsetting me? And usually the answer to that is a lack of progress. If I'm feeling complacent, or if I'm not taking care of my business, or if I'm not moving forward in the direction I want to, then I'm more susceptible to attack, and those attacks hit me a little deeper. But the more successful I get, the more I move forward in life, the further I progress, the less those attacks have any effect on me. And as I said, they very rarely even get acknowledged in my presence. How can triggers ever be used as a warning sign or as opportunities, right? And I look at these the same as I look at relapses, right? It's a gut check, whereas a lot of people will say relapse and die and da 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 and all these things. I mean, yes, that is a very real possibility, right? But I'm actually very thankful for my last relapse. My last relapse pushed my recovery in overdrive, right? Whereas I thought I may have had this thing under control, and some of these answers were there. My last relapse threw my recovery into go mode, and it was all momentum after that, because my last relapse showed me that I have got to figure this out. I have got to figure this out. So for me, I'm very grateful for my last relapse. And you won't find a lot of people who say that. I am. Why? Because I took it as a lesson. And honestly, I took it as a blessing, right? Because if I wouldn't have had that relapse, who knows where life would have went, right? I could have went down a seriously wrong path for a very long time. But that relapse was like the awakening for me. It woke me up and said, okay, I got to put more work in. And that's just what I've been doing ever since. I've just been putting work in. And it starts with daily progress. Today, if I have a day where I don't do nothing, I feel off. Like I feel way off. I've got to make daily progress. I have to keep my forward momentum going. And when my forward momentum's going, my stressors are at a minimum, my triggers are at a minimum, and my relationship is beautiful with everybody. You know what I'm saying? Progress keeps my peace of mind. You know what I mean? Like to me, that is peace, right? And that's how I get my peace, is by progressing through life. You know what I'm saying? So as this was a short, quick video, You know what I'm saying? I just want to talk about a couple things and how we view these triggers, some of our relationships that we get into. And you know what I'm saying? Like, you really have to look at those relationships, man, and say, is this good for me or is this bad for me? And not all relationships have to leave for a while, but this is a journey of self discovery. You know what I'm saying? And when we're in addiction, especially if we meet somebody in addiction, when y'all step into recovery, y'all going to be two completely different people with two completely different motives. And you know what I'm saying? You don't want anything to hinder that. And you definitely don't want somebody holding you back from you saving you. You know what I mean? So this it's meant for self-discovery. It's something that's meant to do alone, right? You come in at a very vulnerable, a very weak stage, and you leave a whole new person, a whole new person. And you'd be amazed at how far you come at the end of the road if you will just watch those certain things and pay attention to those certain things and be willing to step out there by yourself and take a leap of faith and say, I got to do this thing for me. I got to do this thing for me. And if you're supportive, you'll be there when I get back. Or if you're supportive, you'll come with me and you'll rock this thing all the way down with me. And if we come to an agreement, that it's all about what's good for you, right? You want it calm, cool, and smooth. You know what I mean? Anything that's going to turn into a roller coaster, you got to let that stuff go. You know what I'm saying? Cell phones, shoot, I had to lose my cell phone for a long time. You know, best thing I ever did. Money, I had to get rid of money for a long time. You know, those are triggers for me. Big time triggers. Money's a trigger for everybody. I don't care who you are. Money's a huge trigger in this world. Learn to live without. Be a good steward of what you have, and God will bless you with more. You know what I'm saying? Use what you have wisely. And once you've used what you have wisely, then you can obtain more and do the same with that, right? It makes no sense to give an addict $1,000,000. What's an addict going to do? He's going to go right back to doing it. I know I would. You know what I'm saying? Makes no sense, right? Take care of what you have first. And that first thing is you. You have to take care of you first. Everything else comes after. Y'all have